You were born with a natural essence. It's kind of like who you're created to be, and it's kind of fixed in you. And then you have what's called a childhood wound. So there's something that happens early in childhood, whether it's your upbringing or if it's a traumatic experience that you've had. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a real event. It could be your perception of how things were growing up. But that shapes you. It makes you all of a sudden realize that who I thought I was, I'm not.
We are back again, and today we have with us Lisa Spears. Lisa works with Aspire, and so thank you so much for being here today. But Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Aspire?
Sure. Again, my name is Lisa Spears, and I am the Chief Clinical Officer at Aspire Behavioral Health. What that means is that I have the ability to supervise and have oversight of about 300 employees at Aspire. Wow. And I work really on the behavioral health side.
Oh, cool.
Well, we're going to get right to it. Lisa's here to talk to us today about the Enneagram. And I know some people don't know what the Enneagram is, or maybe they've never heard of it. So can you kind of just share a little bit about the history of it and what it is exactly?
Sure. So I learned about the Enneagram just a couple of years ago. It was something that I just kind of had heard about in some podcasts, and it kind of piqued my interest. And what I realized is, though the Enneagram to me is kind of a new thing, and maybe it's kind of a trendy thing right now, it's actually been around for like thousands of years.
Oh, wow.
The first reference of the Enneagram was actually in 339 AD, where there was some discussion amongst some priests about there being 7 fixations that people have that prevent them from being able to pray. And then around the 14th century, it kind of popped back up again, and it became what is actually now called the Enneagram.
That's neat.
Yeah. I was not expecting that. I was like, a few years ago, that.
It's been around a minute.
Oh, my goodness. So can you give us a quick rundown of the different Enneagram types?
Yeah, so there are 9 Enneagram types, and the Enneagram itself is kind of considered, I guess, now it's considered like a personality test. I don't even really like to call it that because it's so much more than that, because personality types can be really popularized, and you know, they can be a really trendy thing to do, and you know, I'm a golden retriever, or I'm a D. But the Enneagram is a lot deeper than that. There are actually 9 Enneagram types, and basically a person is born with a particular type, and our nature, how we grow up, the environment that we're raised up in actually shapes our Enneagram number. And so, like I said, there's 9, and I'll run through the different Enneagram types in a minute, but there's a couple of different facets to it. So kind of how it goes is you're born with a natural essence. It's kind of like who you're created to be, and it's kind of fixed in you. And then you have what's called a childhood wound. So there's something that happens early in childhood, whether it's your upbringing or if it's a traumatic experience that you've had. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a real event. It could be your perception of how things were growing up. But that shapes you. It makes you all of a sudden realize that who I thought I was, I'm not.
Right.
That happens early in childhood. Usually about age 10, you're kind of fixed in that now understanding that things aren't the way that you thought they were. And then what happens is you develop this basic desire to return back to that. You know, so you want to become this thing that you all of a sudden realize that you weren't. And then what happens is there becomes a fear. So you develop a fear of, oh, I'll never be able to be, you know, this thing that I want to be. And then we develop what's called fixations to kind of compensate for that. Okay. So that's kind of what that looks like, and I'll describe it a little bit more when we talk about the numbers.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize how deep it was. I recently took the test the other day and could not read the results, but I think I am a 1 with the wing 2.
Probably, yep.
And so I was like, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, this makes sense. Oh, yeah, I can totally relate to that. But what are some benefits to teens and young adults in knowing their type?
Well, it really, when I first did my Enneagram test, I've done all different kinds of profiles. You know, I'm in counseling, and I love learning about people. I love learning about myself. The benefit of this is it actually not only helped me to identify my strengths and some of the really great attributes that I have, but it also identified some growth areas, some things in my life that if I don't recognize these things can lead to very unhealthy and dysfunctional patterns of behavior.
That's interesting. I know we've talked about the Enneagram before, and I think just in talking before I even took the test, you were like, pretty sure you're a 1. I can tell.
Which, by the way, you're not supposed to you're not supposed to tell other people what you think they are. I guess you're not supposed to diagnose somebody's Enneagram number, but for me, it's so much fun, and I love helping people to discover who they are, that I can't help it sometimes.
But it was neat, and then I went and took it, and I was a 1 wing too, so we're kind of twins.
Yeah.
But like you said, it not only brings out things that I already knew about myself, but then I can also identify those areas that, okay, I know when I'm kind of being unhealthy and need to kind of steer away from that. I'm more self-aware, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got a couple teenagers, in my family, and we talk very openly about, I've got one who is a 9/8 wing. I'm pretty sure she's actually an 8 with a 9 wing, but we're still exploring that because she's really sassy, and 8s are they like to be in control, and they don't, when there's an injustice, they're going to fight for that justice, and that's how my 15-year-old very much acts a lot of the times, but at the end of the day, she's also a peacekeeper, which is an attribute of a 9.
Right.
So one of the other benefits to know what your Enneagram number is to know also how you relate to other people and what your Enneagram number is like in relationship.
Right.
And how you show up, and then not just holding on to the excuse, this is how I am, but now I can show up differently because
I have a responsibility of, kind of working on some of my, on my behaviors that aren't healthy all the time.
Yeah. And I think that's what we were talking about as we were preparing for this, was like a lot of times people will take take personality tests, or they kind of know their characteristics. So I've heard people say things like, well, I'm just really honest, so that's how I am. And I'm like, no, you're kind of being rude, you know? And it's not an excuse to be a certain way. You kind of have to adjust. And so I think for teenagers thinking about going into the workplace, or even in school, having to work in teams with other people, we said we wanted to make sure that we brought this up today. It's not an excuse just to be a certain way because you figure out what your type is. So maybe talk a little bit more about how you can take that and grow with it.
The interesting thing about the Enneagram versus other personality tests, with every other personality test, that's exactly what happens is, I'll go through a personality test with someone that I'm counseling, and they're like, well, that's who I am. And then I can use it as ammunition for everybody else when, I don't have to change who I am because this is who I am. The interesting thing about the Enneagram is when you really begin to learn who you are, it's almost a little bit disheartening for a second because you're like, oh, there's all of these things about me, that woundedness has created that now I have a responsibility to do something about, So like, for instance, ones can come across as really hypercritical and judgmental, and they have very high standards for themselves and other people. Well, knowing that now, you're not just going to say, well, I'm an Enneagram 1, so I'm just going to judge everybody, but, you would really want to look at those things about you, and you would want to say, okay, what are some areas in my life where maybe I need to work on releasing some control, releasing some expectations, and recognizing that who I am is good enough, that I don't have to be perfect.
Yeah, and giving yourself grace, because that's the hardest thing for me. Like, I hold myself to this level, and I'm like, okay, you did something wrong, go in the punishment corner, because now you need to punish yourself until you feel like you dealt with the punishment, then you can come back. And that's just not helpful in the workplace or in any relationships. It's about saying, okay, you messed up, you're human. Now what are you going to do to correct it?
Exactly. And so number twos, they are helpers. They are the ones in life who they want to go out and do and serve, and they always want to be engaged in helping others and doing for other people. But that can also turn into really risky behavior because they become so self-sacrificing, and what they're doing is they're searching for love through doing things for others. And so it's really important to recognize, oh, hey, I might not be in a healthy place right now, because if my motivations of doing this thing for this other person are so that they will love me, then I'm not doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
That's true.
You know, 3s are performers. So a 3, they are all about, you know, putting on this front and making everybody like them and accept them and want them. Their biggest fear is that they aren't worthy. And so, you know, a 3 has to be really mindful that, you know, they can put themselves out there and perform, but they're doing it in order to get something back in return. And a lot of times 3s struggle with inauthenticity. So they struggle with just not being real.
Right.
And that actually becomes, you know, when I talked about fixations earlier, a fixation for a 3 very well could be to be a performer but not to be genuine.
Oh, wow.
You know, because to be real means to be vulnerable, and that might mean that you might not accept me, you might reject me. 4s, they want to be individuals. Their whole desire is to be unique, is to be seen as set apart and different, and they really struggle with feeling like others don't understand them. And so oftentimes 4s will kind of retreat into themselves, or they'll retreat into their emotions and stay very fixated in their emotions. It's almost like, if you could picture a teenager for a 4, what I would think of would be like kind of your, you know, your real grunge-looking teen who is very into, like, you know, slam metal, and, you know, they're wearing all black. I mean, that's kind of like what a 4 personifies.
Right.
Very artsy, and, you know, but the beautiful thing about 4s is that when they can embrace, you know, their individuality and just really understand their uniqueness, then they can step out and help others to be able to connect with, you know, emotions and in relationship. 5s, they are the investigators. I'm a 5. And
Totally see that.
yeah, and so I mean, so the thing about 5s is they're always about gathering information, but their biggest desire in life is to be seen as capable. They want to be able to be seen as like knowing that they've got their stuff together. They want everybody to think that they've got their stuff together, and so they're always like on a voracious search of gathering information, and they're really careful not to say anything unless they know that the information that they're giving is correct. But 5s struggle to connect emotionally. Everything is overwhelming to them. And so a lot of times you'll see a 5 disconnect when they feel like the world around them is overwhelming, or if they feel like they aren't capable, they'll withdraw into themselves. So for a 5, you know, they would want to be really mindful that, you know, sometimes they're kind of going away into their fantasy world or into their thoughts and not engaging with the world around them. I struggle. My family members sometimes will say, like you're not here. You're here, but you're not here.
Yeah.
And 5s also, ironically, have the lowest amount of energy of all the Enneagram types. And so one of the most common things you'll hear out of my mouth is, "I'm so tired. Like, I don't have any more energy."
Right.
Like, I'm, you know, but it's true.
Yeah.
You know, 6s, they are known as the ones who are always seeking security. So 6s are the ones that if you get on an airplane with them, they know where the exit rows are. They know all the statistics on a plane crash. Like, they know the best odds if you're sitting in the back or if you're sitting in the front. They have already like scoped out, like, and then they're on constant alert.
I got you. They know where all the exits, wherever they're sitting at. They're like, I know that exit right here, how to get out. Yes.
So they're wonderful to be around because you know that, like, if you're going on a trip with them, they've got the plan. Also, they're the one that has the medical kit with them.
Right.
They probably, you know, they brought the defibrillator. I mean, they are
prepared.
equipped. I love traveling with the 6 because I don't usually show up like that.
Yeah.
But one of the growth areas for a 6 would be, you know, that they are very fear-based. So they live in anxiety, and so oftentimes, you know, they won't step out and do, you know, things in life out of, you know, just that fear of what could happen because they fatalize things. 7s are kind of your playful folks. They are the ones who are kind of the life of the party. They are ever the adventurers, but their real goal, honestly, is to avoid pain. You know, they want to be engaged and connected, but they are afraid that if they do, then they're going to have to experience pain at some level. And so oftentimes they'll kind of put off pain through like jokes and laughter and cutting up and just avoiding altogether.
Hiding behind some of that.
Using humor.
Yeah. So when you see a young person and you've got them in a classroom, or, you know, you've got them in your family, and anytime you have to talk about hard stuff, they go to cutting up or, kind of diffusing the situation. A lot of times it's because you're dealing with a 7 and their real fear, their real worry is, that that pain is going to be so difficult to deal with that it's going to be overwhelming to them. 8s are the challengers. They are the ones that need to be in control. They are the ones that they need to, they have a real strong fight in them for justice, to fight for the underdog. A lot of times that comes from the fact that 8s at a young age did not feel protected themselves. They maybe grew up in environments that were abusive, either physically or emotionally. And so as adults, they feel like they've got to handle every situation. They've got to be in control of things. They can sometimes be considered aggressive. They're one of the Enneagram types that are maybe the most misunderstood because they come across as so sometimes scary.
Yeah.
But under all of that really is just a desire to be connected with others and not to have control, but to be in loving relationships where they can relinquish some of that. And then the last Enneagram type, 9, they're the peacekeepers. So they are the ones in the Enneagram that personify just conflict, conflict resolution and keeping the peace with everybody. They tend to be more conservative with who they are, more reserved as people, willing to kind of go along with what anybody wants them to do. Don't really cause much of a fuss or much of a rumble about things, and sometimes, but then they can also be passive aggressive. So if you continue to take advantage of a 9, then they'll show anger in very passive aggressive ways. So
that's interesting.
That's kind of a rundown of the 9 Enneagram types.
I mean, what I found interesting is just realizing that the childhood wound piece, because that makes so much sense. And so for me, I lost my mom at such a young age, so I became controlling over the things that I could control because I experienced something outside of that I couldn't control. I couldn't control her passing away due to cancer. So it just, now that makes me even want to investigate more, because I was the type of person who was like, I'm not doing the Enneagram. Everybody's doing the Enneagram. It's just this thing that everybody's doing. And then now, but hearing the background of what you just presented, I'm like, oh, okay. Because now I remember everything I read about myself, like, oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. How I show up unhealthy
when
sometimes.
I first took the Enneagram test, I actually tested as a 6, and which is true. I mean, I have, what you learn about the Enneagram is that you have a main Enneagram type, and then you have a wing. You had referenced a wing earlier. And so when I first tested, I tested as a 6, but the more that I started learning about the Enneagram, what really helped me to see who I truly am in my Enneagram was when I read about the childhood wound. And so when I read what a childhood wound for a 5 was, it resonated so much with me. I'm like, I know that's who I am.
Right.
And so I'm a 5 with a 6 wing, but what I'm also learning is that as a person reaches their midlife, which I may or may not be in, you start actually taking on the other wing as well. So I'm starting to see a little bit of a balance now in a balance in my Enneagram, at least.
Yeah, because it evolves, right? Like as you change, your numbers show up differently.
Right.
Personality.
Yep.
It's neat. I mean, I have the same control thing, and I think it just makes me more aware of that, and it's something that I have to work on every day. Like I can see where I want to try to take control and plan everything out, and so like I think what's interesting too though is then when so like my husband, I made him take it, and so for the teenagers, like even if your friends or your family members take it, then now I understand maybe why he does what he does. He gets me a little bit more. We were listening to a podcast of an Enneagram one, and the lady was like, well, whenever I leave a conversation, I analyze it and I go over everything I say and I think, did I say that wrong? And it was like a light bulb went off. My husband looked at me and he was like, you're not the only one that does that. I think he just thought I was crazy. And I'm like, no, I'm not the only, and so it also helps to dig a little bit deeper, and you can listen to podcasts about the different types and ones that are similar to you, and then you see like, okay, I'm not the only one who feels this way or thinks this way, and here's how I can try to improve and do better on certain things.
Well, for sure. I mean, for me, being a 5, when 5s, there's called a triad, and the triad has different emotions that different Enneagram types most associate with. And so 1s, 2s, and 3. No, I'm sorry. I just messed that up. 8s, 9s, and 1s most relate to the emotion of anger. So an 8, a 9, and a 1, the emotion that they feel right off the bat, if something happens, if something goes wrong, if there is a conflict, they immediately get angry. It's just like an unconscious thing that happens, and like now they exhibit those emotions differently. So an 8, when they get angry, I mean, it's here. Like, they are in your face. They're ready to fight. You can see them, like, physically, like, bristle. Yeah. Well, a 9 is going to be very passive-aggressive. So they're going to bottle all of their anger up, and you might not even know that they're angry, but inside they are like a volcano. Right. Well, in a 1 is just going to be a little bit more controlled about their anger. So they're going to be more clipped in their tone. They're going to, like, their anger is going to be more like pointed. Yeah, like they're going to go like this, whereas an 8, it gets everybody. Right. And a 9, you don't even know it at all. Yeah. So a 2, 3, and 4, their emotion that they are most connected with is shame. So when a conflict or when there's a misunderstanding that takes place with one of those Enneagram types, they immediately personalize that to being there's something wrong with them. Like they are not good enough, they are not worthy. And you'll see that exhibited in different ways. You know, with a 2, it's going to be, they'll turn it in on themselves. You know, with a 3, sometimes it can become kind of narcissistic looking. You know, so they'll deflect that. You know, that because their whole need is to be worthy. Right. Well, if you feel shame, you're not worthy. It's the opposite of that. So they're going to deflect that sometimes. Oh, wow. And then a 4 is just going to be all over the place with their shame and their feelings. They might write a song about it or whatever. And then the 5, 6, and 7s, the emotions that they most connect with is anxiety, and which is me. Because everything that happens with me, I feel it physiologically with anxiety. You know, everything stresses me out. You know, right. My body gets all stressed out and does the things that your body does when you get, you know, anxious and all those kinds of things. So, yeah.
Whew, Lisa read my mail today. But so at next up we have our theme. We have 3 E's, which is elevate, educate, and empower. So this is our part of Courtney, help me out. Elevate, right? Yeah. I'm like, I know these. I really do know our E's. But it's all about self-awareness. Yes. So we want to promote with young adults. The more you become self-aware, the more you can make different decisions of how you show up. You know, if that person is triggering you, you're like, okay, now I know, I'm aware, then you can make a different decision. Because I always think self-awareness is just when choice becomes on the table.
That's right.
And then once what I choose, that's on me. You know, and so I think we want to encourage you guys to continue to learn more about yourself and how you show up now, because then that can probably save you so much headache in the future, and you can make different decisions as well. So
yeah, exactly. Absolutely. For sure. Yeah, I mean, this just really gives you an opportunity to learn about yourself, you know, and in a non-judgmental way, in a way that is so filled with grace, you know, because this is kind of who you were created to be, and now you have an opportunity to learn the good, the bad, and the ugly about yourself, and then to be able to grow to become the best version of you so that you can have really healthy relationships in the future. And that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. She wrapped it up. Yeah. I think that's exactly, you know, why we wanted to talk about it today, and I would love to talk about the Enneagram all day long. It's so interesting, and it makes me want to go read more about it. Now, if people don't know what their Enneagram type is, would you just recommend like hopping online and finding a quiz?
So, I mean, there are online tests, and I mean, if you really wanted to get into it and really wanted like a comprehensive test to take, then you can pay for it, and that would be like on Enneagram Institute. And there's another test that's called roadbacktoyou.com. But there are some free ones on there that'll kind of point you in the right direction, and then do lots of, you know, self-education. Like I referenced a minute ago, the Enneagram Institute will give you free profiles. So, and I mean, it's like a thick book that'll kind of read your mail. And then there's a couple of books too that are out there. The Road Back to You is kind of a simple book that kind of just breaks the different Enneagrams down, and then there's a couple of other books as well. Tons of podcasts about it. There's one called Typology, And then Jen Hatmaker right now actually is doing a whole series on the Enneagram as well. So she's interviewing different people who have that Enneagram type. So it's been really interesting too to hear her interview these folks. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Good. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for coming today. We hope that you can just use this as another tool in your toolbox, like we said, just to become more self-aware and just to become a better version of yourself. So if you don't know your Enneagram type, we encourage you to get out there and figure it out and do a little research, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.